The pottery wheel turns in a slow, steady rhythm between them, and the clay feels cool and slippery under their fingers as they both try to figure out what they're supposed to be doing with it. She looks up at him with wide eyes, nervous in a way that makes her seem like she's about to say something she'll regret, and then her voice comes out soft, but somehow loud enough for the entire room to hear when she says, "Be gentle. It's my first time." The whole class goes completely silent, and he can feel every single person turn their head to stare at them. His heart slams hard against his ribs, and for a second, he forgets how to breathe. Because did she really just say that out loud, right here, in front of all these people? His hands hover over the wet clay, frozen in place, and he doesn't know where to look or what to do with his face because her eyes are locked on his, wide and nervous, and so painfully sincere that he can't tell if she realizes what just came out of her mouth. Then she bursts out laughing, her whole face lighting up with embarrassment as she covers her mouth with one clay covered hand and says, "Making a pot? I meant making a pot." Her cheeks flush a deep, burning red, and she looks like she wants to disappear into the floor. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe, and let me know where you are watching from. He exhales hard, trying not to laugh too loud because she looks so mortified that he almost feels bad for her, but the grin on his face won't go away, no matter how hard he tries to control it. The tension in the room breaks apart into scattered chuckles and whispers, and she buries her face in both hands, still laughing but also groaning like she can't believe she just did that. He leans in a little closer, dropping his voice low enough that only she can hear him when he says, "You really just said that out loud, huh?" She peeks at him through her fingers, her eyes still bright with laughter and embarrassment, and she mumbles, "I panicked, okay? This clay is so slippery, and I didn't know what else to say." He smirks, dipping his hands back into the wet, messy clay on the wheel, and he keeps his eyes on hers when he says, "Relax, I'll be gentle." Her eyes flick up to meet his, and for half a second, neither of them moves or breathes or does anything except stare at each other while the wheel keeps spinning beneath their hands and the clay wobbles dangerously between them. Somewhere in that quiet, loaded moment, something shifts in the air around them. Something playful and curious and just a little bit dangerous, like they both know this is going to be more interesting than either of them planned for. He tries to focus on the clay, but it's hard to concentrate when she keeps laughing at herself every few seconds, and he can't help but wonder how he even ended up here in the first place. His friend Marcus was supposed to come with him to this pottery class, some weekend thing Marcus signed them both up for after a night of too many drinks and bad decisions. But Marcus bailed this morning with some excuse about his car breaking down. He almost didn't come either, almost stayed home and wasted another Saturday doing nothing, but something made him show up anyway. And now here he is, sitting across from a girl who just announced her first time to an entire room of strangers. She catches him staring and raises an eyebrow, her hands still covered in wet clay. "What?" she asks, trying to sound defensive, but failing because she's still smiling. "Nothing," he says, shaking his head. "Just trying to figure out if you're always like this or if today is special." She laughs again, louder this time, completely unbothered by the question. "I've been putting this class off for months," she admits, using the back of her wrist to push a strand of hair out of her face and leaving a streak of clay across her forehead without realizing it. "It was on my list of things to try. You know, new experiences, step out of my comfort zone, all that stuff people say you're supposed to do. But I kept finding excuses not to come." "So what changed?" he asks, genuinely curious now. She shrugs, her smile turning softer, a little more honest. I decided I was tired of being scared of looking stupid. He grins at that, glancing pointedly at the mess of clay between them that barely resembles anything close to a pot. Well, mission accomplished. She gasps in mock offense, flicking a tiny bit of clay at him that lands on his shirt, and he laughs, holding up his hands in surrender. The instructor is walking around the room now, stopping at each wheel to give advice and corrections, and he can feel the pressure building to actually make something that doesn't look completely terrible. She must feel it too, because she suddenly goes quiet, biting down on her bottom lip as she leans forward and tries to shape the clay. With more focus this time, he watches the way her fingers press into the wet surface, hesitant and unsure, and he realizes she has no idea what she's doing. Her hands are shaking just a little, nervous energy pouring out of her with every failed attempt to make the clay cooperate. Their elbows bump together as they both reach for the same spot, and she pulls back quickly, apologizing under her breath. You have to commit to it, he says quietly, moving his stool a little closer so their knees are almost touching under the wheel. If you're too careful, it won't hold. She looks up at him, her eyes searching his face, like she's trying to figure out if he's talking about pottery or something else entirely. Easy for you to say, she murmurs. Have you done this before? He pauses, his smile coming slow and deliberate as he tilts his head slightly. Maybe. She narrows her eyes at him, suspicious now. That's not an answer. Once or twice, he admits, enjoying the way her expression shifts from nervous to annoyed in half a second. But I'm not that good at it. You just have to get your hands dirty if you want it to work. Her breath catches for a moment, so brief he almost misses it. But then she recovers and rolls her eyes at him. Great! So you've been watching me struggle this whole time and didn't say anything? I like watching you struggle, he says without thinking, the words slipping out before he can stop them, teasing but edged with something more honest than he intended. She stares at him, her lips parting slightly like she's about to say something back, but then the clay collapses under her hands again, sliding sideways into a lumpy, unrecognizable mess, and she groans loudly, dropping her forehead into her palm. This is impossible. Here, he says, reaching across the wheel to steady her wrist with one hand, while his other hand guides hers back to the clay. His fingers close over hers, firm but gentle, and she inhales sharply at the contact, her whole body going still for a second before she relaxes into his touch. He can feel her pulse racing under his thumb, quick and unsteady, but she doesn't pull away. You're pressing too hard. Let it move with you. She nods, not saying anything, and he can tell she's trying to focus on the clay, but her attention is somewhere else entirely. They work together like that for a few minutes, his hand guiding hers, their breathing falling into the same rhythm as the wheel turns beneath them. Her knee brushes against his under the table, barely noticeable, but neither of them moves away. The instructor stops beside their wheel, watching them work for a moment before nodding approvingly. You two have great chemistry, she says with a warm smile. It's rare to see partners sync up this quickly. They both go completely quiet, freezing in place like they've been caught doing something they shouldn't. Even though all they're doing is making a pot, the instructor moves on to the next pair, oblivious to the tension she just left behind, and he risks a glance at her. Her cheeks are flushed again, but this time it's not from embarrassment. Chemistry, huh? He says quietly, his voice low enough that only she can hear. She doesn't look at him, keeping her eyes fixed on the clay as it starts to take shape between their hands, wobbly and uneven, but finally beginning to look like something real. Don't let it go to your head, she mutters, but there's a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth that gives her away. He grins, leaning back just enough to give her space, but keeping his hand close to hers in case she needs help again. The pot is far from perfect, lopsided and rough around the edges, but it's theirs, and somehow that feels like it matters more than getting it right. If you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Have you ever said something awkward that turned into something amazing? The pot collapses again about 10 minutes later, folding in on itself like it gave up trying to be anything useful. And she makes a sound somewhere between a laugh and a groan as clay splatters across both of their hands. He shakes his head, biting back a grin, because at this point, they've started over at least 4 times, and neither of them seems to care anymore about actually finishing a proper piece. There's clay smeared up her forearms now, streaked across her collarbone, where she must have touched herself without thinking. And he's pretty sure he has some in his hair, but he's not about to check. Okay, one more time, she says, determination flooding back into her voice as she rolls up her sleeves higher, even though they're already as far up as they'll go. We can do this. We're adults. We can make one simple pot. You're really bad at this, he says, watching her gather another handful of clay and slap it down onto the wheel with way too much force. She whips her head around to glare at him, but there's no heat behind it, just playful annoyance mixed with something warmer. Excuse me, you're supposed to be helping. I am helping, he says, leaning back on his stool with his arms crossed, still grinning at her. I'm providing moral support. You're providing commentary. She shoots back, but she's smiling now too, unable to keep up the act. There's a difference. He watches her try to center the clay again, her fingers pressing down with clumsy confidence, and he notices the way her tongue pokes out slightly between her lips when she concentrates really hard on something. It's distracting in a way he doesn't want to admit, so he forces himself to look away, focusing instead on the other people in the class who all seem to be doing much better than they are. When he looks back at her, she's already staring at him with one eyebrow raised. Then why do you keep watching my hands? She asks, her voice dropping lower, teasing but edged with genuine curiosity. He opens his mouth to respond, some easy deflection ready on his tongue, but nothing comes out because she's looking at him in a way that makes his brain stop working properly. Her eyes are bright and challenging, waiting for an answer he's not sure he should give, so instead he just shrugs and says, maybe I'm trying to figure out what you're doing wrong so I can fix it. Liar, she says softly, but she's smiling when she says it, and the word doesn't sound like an accusation at all. They go back to working on the clay together, shoulders brushing every time one of them leans in to adjust something, and the closeness feels different now, heavier somehow, like the air between them is holding its breath. She reaches across to smooth out a bump on the side of the pot, leaning in so close that he can smell her shampoo, something light and floral that makes him forget what he's supposed to be doing with his hands. He freezes, his fingers still pressed against the clay, and he wonders if she notices the way he stops breathing for a second. You okay? She asks, glancing at him sideways without moving away. Yeah, he says, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. Fine. She leans back, giving him space again, but the smell of her shampoo lingers in the air between them, and he can't seem to shake it from his mind. The wheel keeps turning under their hands, the clay spinning in circles that feel hypnotic after a while, and they fall into a comfortable rhythm of trying and failing and trying again without getting frustrated. At some point, she gets clay on her cheek, a small smudge right below her eye, and he reaches over without thinking to wipe it away with his thumb. She goes very still when he touches her face, her eyes widening slightly, but she doesn't pull back or tell him to stop. His thumb lingers there for a moment longer than necessary, and he can feel the warmth of her skin under the clay, soft and real and so close he could lean forward just a few inches, and close the distance between them entirely. But he doesn't. Instead, he pulls his hand back slowly and wipes the clay off on his jeans, trying to act like that didn't just happen. Thanks, she murmurs, her voice barely above a whisper. You had something on your face, he says, like that explains everything. I have clay all over me, she points out, gesturing vaguely at her arms and shirt. You didn't have to get that specific one. He doesn't have a good answer for that, so he just smiles and goes back to the pot, which is somehow still holding together despite their best efforts to ruin it. They work in silence for a few minutes, both of them pretending to be focused on the task, but really just hyper aware of every tiny movement the other person makes. Her knee presses against his under the table, warm and steady, and neither of them moves away. Can I ask you something? She says eventually, breaking the quiet between them. Sure, he says, keeping his eyes on the clay, even though he can feel her watching him. Why did you stay? She asks, her voice careful, like she's not sure if she's allowed to ask. When your friend canceled, I mean, you could have just left. He considers the question for a moment, trying to find an answer that doesn't sound too honest or too revealing, but then he realizes he's tired of pretending he doesn't know why he's still here. I don't know, he admits, glancing up at her. Something about your laugh made me curious. Her expression softens at that, surprise flickering across her face before it settles into something warmer, more vulnerable. My laugh? Yeah, he says, shrugging like it's no big deal, even though it feels like a much bigger admission than he intended. You laughed at yourself after you said that thing about it being your first time, and I thought anyone who can embarrass themselves like that and still find it funny is probably worth sticking around for. She stares at him for a long moment, her lips parting slightly like she's about to say something important. But then the clay slips under both of their hands at the exact same time, and the pot wobbles dangerously to one side. She laughs, loud and bright and completely unguarded, but her eyes don't leave his face, and he notices the way her gaze drops briefly to his mouth before flicking back up to meet his eyes. Are you always this nervous? He asks, his voice quieter now, more serious. She hesitates, biting down on her bottom lip again in that way that drives him a little crazy. And then she leans in closer, close enough that he can see the flecks of green in her brown eyes, and whispers, only when it matters. His heart does something complicated in his chest, stuttering and then racing to catch up, and he realizes they've both stopped moving entirely. The wheel is still spinning beneath their hands, but neither of them is paying attention to the clay anymore. He can see the rise and fall of her breathing, quick and shallow, and he wonders if she can hear how fast his heart is beating because it feels impossibly loud in his ears. Why are you really here? He asks because he needs to know, needs to understand what made her walk through those doors today. She exhales slowly, looking down at their hands, still covered in wet clay. And when she speaks, her voice is softer, more honest than it's been all afternoon. I got out of a relationship a few months ago, she says, not meeting his eyes. It ended badly, the kind of bad where you start to wonder if you're ever going to feel like yourself again. I made this list of things I wanted to try, things I'd been putting off because I was always too scared or too comfortable or too whatever. This class was on that list. I figured if I could just do one thing that scared me, maybe I could start feeling brave again. He doesn't say anything for a moment, just lets her words settle in the space between them, and then he reaches over and covers her hand with his, clay and all. For what it's worth, he says quietly, I think you're pretty brave. She looks up at him, her eyes shining with something he can't quite name, and she smiles, small but genuine. Thanks. The wheel keeps turning beneath their hands, and somehow, impossibly, the pot starts to take real shape between them. It's still wobbly and uneven in places, far from perfect, but it holds together when she pulls her hands away to examine it. Her whole face lights up with excitement, and before he can react, she grabs his arm with both hands, squeezing tight in celebration. We did it, she says, laughing again, that same bright sound that made him stay in the first place. Look at it. It's terrible, but it's real. He looks down at where her hands are wrapped around his forearm, her fingers pressing into his skin through the clay, and he realizes he should probably say something or move or do anything other than just stand there like an idiot. But he doesn't let go, doesn't pull away, just lets her hold on to him while they both stare at their crooked, messy, completely imperfect pot like it's the most important thing either of them has ever made. She seems to realize she's still holding on to him and starts to pull back, embarrassed again, but he catches her wrist gently before she can fully retreat. Hey, he says, his voice low enough that only she can hear. You did good. She meets his eyes, her smile turning softer, more private, and for a moment they just stand there, covered in clay and grinning at each other like they share a secret the rest of the room doesn't know about. He becomes aware, suddenly and acutely, that the class is almost over, that the instructor is starting to make her rounds to collect finished pieces and dismiss everyone, and neither of them mentions it. Neither of them moves to start cleaning up or preparing to leave. They just stay there, close enough to touch, letting the last few minutes stretch out as long as they possibly can. Don't go anywhere. Things are about to get even more interesting. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. The instructor claps her hands twice to get everyone's attention, announcing that class time is over and they should all start cleaning up their stations and bringing their finished pieces to the drying shelf. The room fills with the sound of stools scraping against the floor, water running in the sinks, people laughing and comparing their work as they wash clay off their hands and arms. He looks at their pot sitting on the wheel between them, still wet and fragile, and he feels something tighten in his chest at the thought of this afternoon ending. We should sign it, she says, reaching for the small wooden tool the instructor left on their table earlier before we put it on the shelf. She carves her name into the bottom of the pot carefully, her tongue poking out between her lips again in concentration, and then she hands him the tool without looking up. He takes it, their fingers brushing for half a second, and adds his name right next to hers, the letters clumsy but readable. When they carry the pot over to the drying shelf together, he notices how crooked it looks compared to all the other pieces, how obviously amateur and rushed, but somehow it feels more important than any of the perfect symmetrical bowls surrounding it. They wash their hands side by side at the long communal sink, not talking much, just standing close enough that their shoulders keep bumping while they scrub clay out from under their fingernails and off their wrists. The water runs cold over his hands, shocking after the warmth of the clay, and he watches her rinse soap from her forearms while trying not to think about the fact that once they walk out that door, this might be over. She might thank him for a fun afternoon, smile politely, and disappear back into whatever life she came from, and he'll never see her again. She dries her hands on a paper towel slowly, methodically, like she's stalling for time, and when everyone else starts filtering toward the exit, she stays where she is, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. He can see her trying to decide something, working through some internal debate she won't share out loud, and he waits, giving her space to figure out whatever she needs to figure out. I should probably go, she says eventually, but she doesn't move toward the door. Yeah, he agrees, even though everything in him wants to ask her to stay longer. Me too. They walk toward the exit together, moving slower than necessary, and when they step outside, the air hits them cooler and quieter than the warm, noisy classroom they just left. The sun is starting to sink lower in the sky, casting everything in that soft, golden light that makes the whole world feel gentler somehow. She stops a few feet from the door, turning to face him,
And there's something different in her expression now, something more open and vulnerable than before. "I'm really glad I said that stupid thing," she says, smiling, but looking a little shy about the admission. "About it being my first time. I know it was mortifying, but if I hadn't said it, we probably wouldn't have talked at all." He steps closer, closing the distance between them until he's near enough to see the way the late afternoon light catches in her eyes, turning them amber around the edges. His voice drops lower when he speaks, quiet enough that she has to lean in slightly to hear him. "I'm really glad I stayed." She looks up at him, holding his gaze for a long moment, and he can see her gathering courage for something, building up to words she's not sure how to say. "Can I tell you something?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. "Anything," he says, meaning it. She takes a breath, looking down at her hands before forcing herself to meet his eyes again. "I almost didn't come today," she confesses. "I woke up this morning and I was already making excuses in my head about why I should skip it. The weather was wrong, I had other things to do. It would probably be boring anyway. But the real reason I didn't want to come is because I've been scared of trying things that might not work out. Everything in my life lately has felt so careful and controlled, like if I just don't take any risks, then I can't get hurt again. But that's not really living, is it? That's just existing."
He listens without interrupting, watching the way her expression shifts while she talks, seeing the weight of what she's carrying written across her face. When she finishes, he takes a moment before responding, wanting to give her honesty in return because she deserves that much. "I've been going through the motions for months," he admits, surprised by how easily the words come once he lets them. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Nothing bad, nothing good, just this endless middle ground where everything feels safe and numb. "My friend signed us up for this class because he said I needed to do something different, shake things up, but I didn't think it would actually matter. I thought I'd spend 2 hours making a bowl I'd never use and go home exactly the same as when I left. But this was the first time in longer than I can remember that something felt spontaneous and real. You felt real." Her eyes go soft at that, shining with emotion. She doesn't try to hide, and she opens her mouth to say something, but then closes it again, like whatever she needs to tell him is stuck somewhere in her throat. She reaches out and touches his arm lightly, her fingers resting just above his elbow, and he can feel the warmth of her hand through his shirt. "I have to tell you something," she says quietly, and there's an apology already forming in the way she says it. "I'm leaving town in 2 weeks. I got a job offer a month ago, something I applied for on a whim because I never thought I'd actually get it. It's across the country, completely different city, and I'm terrified of going, but I can't say no to it. I've been trying to prepare myself, tie up loose ends, say goodbye to people, and I keep telling myself that 2 weeks is plenty of time to get ready. But then today happened, and now I don't know what to think anymore." He goes completely quiet, processing what she just said, feeling the information settle over him like cold water. 2 weeks. She's leaving in 2 weeks, and he just met her 2 hours ago. And none of this makes any sense because how is he supposed to feel this much for someone who's about to disappear from his life before they even get a chance to start anything real? A car drives past them on the street, engine humming low, and neither of them moves or looks away from each other. "Say something," she whispers, and he can hear the nervousness creeping back into her voice. "Please." He looks at her for a long moment, taking in every detail of her face, like he needs to commit it to memory right now in case this is all the time they get. Her eyes are searching his, waiting for rejection or disappointment or whatever reaction she's been bracing herself for. But all he feels is this overwhelming certainty that he can't let her walk away without at least trying. A slow, soft smile spreads across his face, genuine and warm despite the complications spinning through his mind.
Then I guess we better make it count, he says simply. Her breath catches, surprise and relief flooding her expression all at once, and before he can second guess himself, she reaches for his hand. He takes it without hesitation, their fingers threading together naturally, and he can feel the slight tremble in her grip, like she's still not entirely sure this is real. They stand there on the sidewalk, holding hands in the fading daylight, and he realizes he doesn't care that this is complicated or that the timing is terrible or that 2 weeks isn't enough time for whatever this is trying to become. What are you thinking? She asks softly, squeezing his hand. He doesn't answer right away, just keeps looking at her like he's trying to memorize the exact shade of her eyes, the way her hair falls across her shoulder, the small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. When he finally speaks, his voice comes out low and certain, no hesitation left in it. I'm thinking about next week, he says, leaning in closer until there's barely any space left between them. He stops just short of closing the distance entirely, his lips hovering near her ear as he whispers, "Same time, let me take you somewhere." She shivers despite the warmth still lingering in the evening air, and when she pulls back just enough to look at him, her eyes are bright and full of something that looks dangerously close to hope. Okay, she breathes. Yes, absolutely yes. 7 days later, she's standing in front of him on a rooftop she didn't know existed until 20 minutes ago. The city spread out below them in a blanket of lights that flicker and glow against the dark sky. He brought her here after picking her up in his car, driving through streets she recognized until they turned down an alley she'd never noticed before, and now they're standing on top of an old building that feels like it belongs to them and no one else. The air smells like rain, even though the sky is clear, cool enough that she pulls her jacket tighter around herself. And when he notices, he steps closer without saying anything, sharing his warmth. "How did you find this place?" she asks, looking out at the view that stretches for miles in every direction. "Friend of mine used to live in the building," he explains, leaning against the ledge beside her. "He moved out years ago, but I kept the access code. I come up here sometimes when I need to think." She turns to look at him, studying his profile in the dim light. "And you wanted to share it with me?" "Yeah," he says simply, meeting her eyes. "I did." They settle onto an old bench someone left up here long ago, the wood worn smooth from weather and time, and she tucks herself against his side without thinking about it. His arm comes around her shoulders automatically, pulling her closer, and they sit like that for a while without talking, just existing together in the quiet. Her hand finds his, fingers sliding between his and holding on, and she realizes how easy this feels now, how all the nervousness from that first afternoon has melted into something warmer and more comfortable. "I'm scared," she says eventually, her voice soft but steady, "about leaving, about starting over somewhere I don't know anyone. I keep telling myself it's a good opportunity and I should be excited, but mostly I just feel terrified." He doesn't try to reassure her or tell her everything will be fine, doesn't offer solutions or advice she didn't ask for. He just listens, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand, letting her work through her thoughts out loud without rushing her to feel differently. "I know it's what I need to do," she continues, staring out at the lights below them. "I know staying here means staying stuck in the same patterns that weren't working before, but knowing something and feeling ready for it are two completely different things. You don't have to feel ready," he says quietly. "You just have to show up and figure it out as you go. That's all anyone ever does." She leans her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with the cool night air, and she feels something settle in her chest, some knot of anxiety loosening just enough to let her breathe easier. "What about you?" she asks. "What happens after I leave?" He's quiet for a moment, considering the question, And when he speaks, his voice carries a weight of honesty that makes her heart ache. I don't know, he admits. I don't know what happens next week or next month or any of it, but I know I don't want to pretend this didn't matter just because the timing is complicated. You matter. This matters. She lifts her head to look at him, her eyes searching his face in the darkness, and she sees the truth of what he's saying written in every line of his expression. He's not making promises he can't keep or pretending they can fix the impossible logistics of her leaving, but he's also not willing to dismiss what they found just because it came at the wrong time. She reaches up with her free hand to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw, and he leans into her touch like he's been waiting for it. I'm really glad you were gentle, she whispers, and there's a smile in her voice, even though her eyes are shining with unshed tears. He laughs quietly, the sound low and warm in his chest, and he turns his head just enough to press a soft, lingering kiss to the top of her head. His lips stay there for several heartbeats, and she closes her eyes, letting herself memorize this exact moment. The
Weight of his arm around her shoulders, the steadiness of his breathing, the way his hand holds hers like he's not planning to let go anytime soon. I'm really glad you gave me the chance, he murmurs against her hair. They fall into silence after that, comfortable and complete, neither of them needing to fill the space with more words. She shifts closer, tucking herself more fully into his side, and he adjusts his position to accommodate her, his arm tightening around her shoulders. Below them, the city continues moving through its Friday night rhythm, cars passing on streets they can barely see, people living their lives completely unaware of the two people sitting on a rooftop, deciding that 2 weeks of something real is worth more than a lifetime of playing it safe. She knows she's still leaving. He knows he's staying. They both know this has an expiration date built into it from the start, that geography and timing are working against them in ways they can't control. But right now, sitting together under a clear sky, with their fingers intertwined and their hearts beating in sync, none of that seems to matter as much as this moment, this choice to hold on while they still can. The night stretches out around them, patient and vast, and they stay exactly where they are. Two people who met by accident and found something deliberate, choosing presence over fear, connection over safety, knowing that sometimes the wrong timing is exactly when the right person shows up. Like this video, subscribe. And let me know, have you ever met someone at exactly the wrong time, but it still felt right? I'd really appreciate it if you could share your thoughts about my videos in the comments. Your feedback helps me improve and create even better content for you. Thank you.